We'd like to do a special thank you to our host, the Looking Glass Theater, which you're at. Hasn't it been so fun? All the music and the vendors and stuff. A good time. I'm Becca. I am your MC for today. We've got over 90 performers and almost 30 vendors across this 2-day extravaganza. So we are just welcoming in AAPI Heritage Month with lots of fun arts and culture. And if you do not know, AAAC is a 501c3 not-for-profit organization, and every donation that you make to us supports Asian American creativity and excellence. So to donate, we've got the QR codes at the door right here. You can also drop your change into the donation box at the door. Every amount counts and does make a difference. So thank you in advance. And to learn more about the performers, vendors, and artists, just go to our website, AAAC.art. And you can tip the performers, tip your bartenders, and thanks. We thank you for supporting the art. So just turn off your phones now, like if they're on silent, that's great. But now I'd like to introduce our performance lecturer for today. We have Olivier, who is an artist cataloger and exiled person whose practice is rooted in ephemerality and the anarchival. They explore rereading through participatory installation, speculative writing, and secret mail art. Please give a warm welcome for Olivier.
Hi. This is going to be a roughly 30 minutes lecture. Whenever I try to time it, actually it's always different because I would take pauses to figure out if I'm saying things that actually make sense. So the slides would be on the screen and the projection, and then some slides of sounds, and then some slides of sounds. And I have roughly 70 slides. So if you want to count the slides, and when will this ever end? You can count the slides. Okay, so this is kind of roughly titled as the two O's in foot and note on footnotes. Originally the title was a little bit longer, but I kind of figured out this is the best I could do. I have a lot of troubles in understanding phrases and expressions because I enjoy text usually quite literally, which means I don't really understand a lot of idioms. So there are layers in meanings and languages because you need to have cultural context, geographical context, historical context, and many times for me it's actually more like a common sense that is not logical or is not actually really common to me. So one of these expressions I'm thinking of is someone or something being reduced to a footnote. So footnotes are this little text, quite literally a tinier font text that is housed underneath a line at the bottom of the page. But before we descend ourselves to the footnotes, I want to tell you why and how this lecture is. This is a borrowed text from Mary Carruthers, her book, Reading with Attitude, Remembering the Book. So the essay that I was thinking of is actually has nothing to do with my research, but I really, really like this sentence. And then I took it out and I altered it a little bit. So it now reads, this is why I have found it a useful place to begin inventing my own mediation on OO. So today's lecture is exactly this. This is purely my own musing on the two O's. This is just to make sure you see the O's I'm talking about. This is what footnotes looks like. So they're usually on the relevant page. They sometimes may overflow to the next page. They're usually identifiable by superscript symbol right here. And then you can see where it corresponds to. So footnotes are surrounded by citations and vice versa. In this slide, you can see number 94 is a footnote, and then number 95 is a citation as a footnote. So both of these are considered as additional information, giving you more than what the main text could ever provide to you. And they also point you to outside of the text, somewhere else that it asks you to go to if you want to learn more about that thing. This is one of my favorite footnotes ever. It says, no love affair, however brief and however young the participants, can ever be summarized in a few lines. For a more complete, complicated, painful account of this affair, see. So this expression of being reduced to a footnote is a symbolic act. It is to purposefully have something at the mere bottom of a page in a traditional book, or even worse, if you're reading a book on a long PDF, you have to scroll all the way down on a web page to see footnotes. A footnote, but that would be a debate on whether that would be an endnote or a footnote. Endnotes are traditionally at all the way end of a chapter or a book, completely being tucked away, and they don't even get to show their face on the relevant page. So back to the symbolic act, it is the gesture of deeming something not having the value as part of the main text. Hence, this footnote, number 51 here, is a great example of a footnote being really aware of itself being seen, being depicted as a footnote. A footnote is doing its assigned responsibility. It is an additional piece of information, but the footnote itself realizes that the contents cannot be contained in itself. So it asks the reader, you should go elsewhere. It will point you to a resource. So for the lecture, what I'm interested in telling you is my considerations of what footnotes are. I see footnotes as texts that are bound to the physical book, and they're bound to their own relevant page. They're not something to be let go of and to be not printed. But now I'm going to show you what I actually see in my brain when I think of footnotes. So this is Feng which translates to win, fire, will. This person right here, this actor, is called Set Inzi. So he's doing the character Na Zha from the 1951 film. This is a beautiful portrait of Na Zha taken by a Malaysian Buddhist monk. It was first uploaded to this monk's his personal blog page, and then he uploaded it to Flickr, and then later on he uploaded it for Wikipedia for its usage. A footnote. As I cannot speak to the popularity of this deity outside of my own Hong Kong context, I mostly will be talking about the Hong Kong interpretation of Na Zha. I understand Na Zha is absorbed in the Chinese mythology and subsequently have impacts culturally and religiously in places that are colonized by China. So Na Zha is how we call them in Cantonese, or how I pronounce it in Cantonese. According to the scholar Mir Shah, Na Zha is a transliterate name from Nalakupara from Hindu and Buddhist mythology. So transliteration means the word comes from a need to replicate foreign phonetics to another language. In this case, is Cantonese. So Nalakupara went from variants to variants. You can see how. Until it reaches at the end, Na Zha, and then at the end, finally, in its final form, it becomes the same pronunciation, Na Zha, which is, it was given a hao, which is what you can see right here. I love PowerPoints because they do that. So what we become now that is the same pronunciation, Na Zha. But because it is a name, it is a word that comes from a transliteration. So Na Zha as a word, as a sound, carries no meaning, but only the sounds of a different language from before. So to do a transliteration of a name into two new characters we're looking at here right now is what I'm really excited about. So if you look at these two characters, Na and Zha, it must be someone's deliberate choice to add in the two haos right here. In my own reading, there are two O's. So, whoops. Okay. So a cousin of transliteration in here, what I'm trying to suggest to as a reading is transgraphic, translingual, transtextual, and what I prefer is just trans. So in this transness, I'm kind of imagining we can begin to consider the phonetics, textual, and visual puns for Na Zha and for this lecture. So let's go back to this footnote for a second. These are the footnotes that I wrote last year. Taking it out of context, I actually think this is still really applicable to what I'm thinking of. I do think I prioritize the play between objects and everything else. This play comes from a form of being proximity, and through this proximity, there lies the possibilities and productions of dialogues. Footnotes. Footnotes. This is a louder version of it, so it's going to sound. Footnotes. This is how you pronounce footnotes in English. There are wheels in Naza's feet. This is lo, will to lo. Lo. Football. I got 5 points. Footnotes. So needless to say, obviously, these are the 2 O's that I'm thinking of in foots already that are in the footnotes. This is a well-documented usage of O's. So let's never start at the beginning. This is actually my beginning. What I'm going to show you. So this is my first introduction to the deity Naza, and marks my confusion to the whole thing and my confused interest in this deity, or my confusion as an interest, or just a big confusing interest. So on the left, this is Homedin as Naza from the 996 Journeys to the West. So she, or Naza, is the one that is kind of flying, hovering right now. As we don't have gender pronouns in Cantonese, so as a kid watching it, I was really concerned about what is Naza's gender and also what is Homedin's gender. I also have other questions that actually is more important. I was kind of asking, like, is this some kind of Peter Pan situation? How are they actually flying? So even as a child, I was kind of joking to ask if this is some Peter Pan shit, but the question is actually really important to what I'm thinking of, because what I'm considering is Naza just did not have the Heelys. So the implication that they could have just traveled in air without any kind of tools is a reduction of the importance of footnotes. This is a footnote. This is a poster from Heelys from 2002. Specifically, please pay attention to the statement, freedom is the will in the soul. Right here. So this is another beginning in the myth. Naza was born as a ball of flesh. So illustratively, as a representation, it is an O. This is a photograph of a similar pair of adjustable rollerblades that I had as a kid. I remember exactly my feelings about it. I feel like I have freedom in my soul. The adjustability of it is actually really freeing, specifically my transness, an intertwinement with flexibility, adjustability, adaptability, and speed and wills. So in this monologue from 1962, Lam Ga-sing is a man who casted as Naza. So he's speaking Cantonese here, while the caption is in traditional Chinese. So as I mentioned before, in Cantonese there are no gender pronouns, but in traditional Chinese characters there are. So Naza here are on the footnotes in the skies, flying around and looking at people on the ground. And then they were saying, hey, there's a girl on the bridge, so they flew towards them. And then when they look closer, they say, curious, he looks just like me. His gestures and movements and even his face. So by speech here, they first thought someone else was a girl, and then they proceed to realize the person is exactly like them, despite their first impression of gender, and there was no gender assigned by speech after this realization. But in the caption of the movie, this someone that was first being perceived as a girl was later assigned as a boy textually by the context of they are a resemblance of Naza themselves. What makes you think this stranger is a woman? Feeling is believing. And you said she perhaps was both. A footnote comes to his aid. Departure, oh nothing, abandoning of oh. With the same remains return. Oh repetitions, in fact, no oh. The preface, other than these in other words, is already, ever different repetitions. Text, forever oh, of, between, reading and reading, language, between, oh text. Text becomes oh, both ends. Text, or reading, preface, each O, no stable end, reading of the self, no stable origin, no stable identity, text is a preface to the mix, no exception, oh, something, origin of my preface, from you reading, defined in, reading of O, or page, or refer to pages. Page who begins what? Oh. And it's the same alternate things in this way. Need, translation, intensity. Oh, edit, unplanned, correct, details. Oh. Drafted, unblurred, uncrafted, queerness. Oh. And readers would notice and lose, never forget. With time. So, some go and need nothing, desire to play. Oh, souls survive, tragedy occurs. Oh, off stage. Oh, we go. Oh, wait. Hats, object. The perfect marriage, also practical identities. Naza has a lot of toys. For example, all these things, pointed out, 昆天龍、炮皮狼、風火輪、火尖槍、斬妖刀、乾坤圈、降魔杖、斬妖劍、九龍神火爪。He who dies with most toys wins. He who dies with most toys still dies. So death is crucial in these footnotes. In various interpretations, Naza gained or lost some of the toys because it was never something particularly unique to them. Other deities also shared these other toys, but only Feng Folong, the wheels on the feet, are actually made unique for Naza. So Naza died so that the footnotes came to existence. Naza technically first killed themselves, and then they were resurrected through a body of lotus flower by the deity of salvation, Taiyuan Zanyan. So Taiyuan Zanyan gifted Naza a bunch of new toys, including what we're talking about today, footnotes. So this is a depiction of Taiyuan Zanyan putting Naza back to life, which is using all these little things, the parts of the lotus, to put them back together, and resurrected Naza into a deity. And I don't actually know how to do it for Jesus, but I actually think this is a lot more fun. So with Naza really newly acquired Hot Wheels down here, I see the footnotes as specialized transportation to complement the new lotus body to the new lotus flower body, which is a very lightweight body. So with these Hot Wheels, they can just roll around through boundaries of dimensions, skies, lands, waters, and probably also doing some drafting, cruising, drifting, skidding. So they're not actually like the VE bikes that you can share and everyone gets to use. They're mostly actually really specific to Nata, special mode of transportation. So if I'm going back to 996 version of Nata that I was introduced as a child, I have some questions. How is it possible that they decide to drop the footnotes? Why do they completely cease someone of their transportation? What is the notion behind reducing the mode of being? And is it true that Kiwis are banned in this country? I actually don't know. The source of this eludes me. To ask readers for help is one of the best uses to which a footnote can be put. They know it is as much as a part of scholarship as knowledge, both should be acknowledged. Footnotes encourage this expansiveness. The bottom of the page becomes a long, winding corridor where the scholar pops up of his office to stretch his legs and meeting colleagues, gossips, tell jokes, rant about politics and society, and feels free to offer opinions based on nothing but his prejudice and whims. In this corridor, the scholar becomes all of that. Abruptly, a footnote clears his throat and says loudly and repeatedly. Out of this kind of annotation of adding information without interrupting the pleasure of the story demands a finely tuned sense of timing and of narrative pool. The pool must be strong enough to carry the reader past the reference mark, but a pause in the story. A diminishing of excitement must occur soon enough for the reader to remember the footnote and wants to return to it. I want to point to my handwritten annotation up there on the top of the paragraph. I'm aware of erotics as a long history with sexual relationship between books and humans, i.e. readers, makers, sellers, scholars, collectors, and writers. But specifically, I'm thinking of erotics, not sexual. Erotics are closer to what I'm thinking of. So perhaps I'm summoning Roland Barthes with his thoughts on garments. Narrative pool is specifically helpful to consider this erotics, this is in relation to rhetorics. This pool, this pause, this diminishing, this excitement, this return, they're all subjective, not lustful, but gesturing to desire. Not desire, but an arrival to lust. By Barthes' garments, I was always intrigued by Roland Barthes' book, Pleasure of the Text. So this is a clip from his book. Erotic, the intermittence of skin flashing between two articles of clothing, between two edges. It is this flash itself which seduces, or rather, the staging of an appearance as disappearance. What I'm considering the erotics in footnotes, or footnote acts text, is the text ability to be confidently right there, right on the page. It must be on the page. A reader's reading is interrupted not by their sudden visual insertion, but their own bulging knowledge of his presence, or their own knowledge of his bulging presence. The space where text occupies is his own, not the main text. The main text does not want to go down there, the footnotes have no interest in going up there either. It remains in what has always been less, or below, or smaller on the ground, because it's not afraid to be reduced to a footnote. It already is. The footnote itself, or in Barthes' case, the skin itself is not erotic, but its presence not yet read creates the reader's need to go down there, perhaps the need to be distracted, being lured to sin, the eyes and subsequently the mind going up and down between two articles of text and ideas. Footnotes can represent that trait of mind. In that sense, footnotes represent organized confusion. The practice of subordinating footnotes to the lower position of the page has the virtue of letting them take up as much space as they like. The assertion of the note, when it becomes more than a reference and begins to structure arguments and counter-arguments, can be quite aggressive. So to see Naza missing the footnotes is actually really different from thinking that Naza doesn't have any footnotes. I'm fully aware that I'm going insane and being obsessive with reading this deity. But it's also exactly this ability to read and the inaccessible reading that I'm interested in, thinking through this transit of bodies, languaging, text, and queerness. So correction, I'm not actually reading this deity, I'm reading with this deity. I'm interested in Naza, but it's also not the history of body that I'm reading. It is about Naza's allowance on me reading through the oaths. To be reading with the deity to see what else it can tell me. What we're looking and reading and seeing together, that informing me how else I can read, where else I can read. To be not given footnotes, the text, or in this case, Naza, they will still be able to be functional and doing its dutiful textual responsibilities, like the text could be making an argument, or in this case, Naza could be still fighting demons without the footnotes. Here's some words on how notes appear and disappear. Notes can appear at any time during the life of the text, if a new edition should offer a new occasion for them. Three relevant occasions: original notes, or those in the first edition; later notes, or notes for the second edition; and the third, delay notes. Sometimes, too, notes disappear from one edition to another. So in our Naza case, we're dragging and dropping Naza throughout culture to culture, from language to language, from religion to religion, to mythology, from temple to temple, from books to films to TV drama. And then the footnotes have always show themselves to us that are changing sizes, they're changing how they're being equipped, also the spinning speed, and then ultimately they will completely disappear. So to go back what I started with the lecture with, the nature of footnotes, it is to be on their own relevant page. It has to be on the page to be called a footnote. If not, they would just be endnotes or other book matter. So we have to consider the status of the footnote and the relationship between the main text and their footnotes on the same page. So in literal text on a page, if you take away the footnotes, the text just stop having footnotes. The sentence or the paragraph or whatever the main text is not going to change, but in fact the design of the page changes. So the next paragraph will kind of just continue to rush in without any footnotes, because the footnotes are not taking up any spaces on the page. So the text shape does not change, it doesn't hold out for a footnote. But for Naza, here's what I'm thinking, which is very exciting for me, is the O's in the name. It makes a difference from reading a text when you have that element to it. The O's allow us to consider reading really differently. If you remember this slide from earlier today, through transliteration, now was used until the Song Dynasty, and then it was added an extra O to the written name. And even though the pronunciation doesn't change at all, everything else does. For example, the literal addition of time to write the extra O, and then the addition of ink to print that extra O. It's almost as if Naza, the name itself, know that one day the footnotes, the two O's, will be ceased. And that the mode of being and the reason of why they can do what they do is being taken away. Obviously, I'm being really dramatic, and it's not actually true that everyone has forgotten the O's of Naza. But through this realization of my introduction of an extremely gender-ambiguous deity, and then being assigned O as birth, I'm really interested in how oneself and the visual of one's name carries the identity of the self. So this is all just to say, this is my name. My name is Olivier. This is how you spell it, Olivier. The two I's in my name is the only reason why I use they and pronouns. So this is kind of the end of my lecture. Thank you for everyone, for some reason, thinking it's a good idea to listen to me. And if you happen to have footnotes or wheels, please write safe, use your breaks, and also when in doubt, footnote proof. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Olivier, and thank you for learning about footnotes today. If you liked any part of the festival is amazing, obviously, but you can go ahead and use the QR codes to donate any more every a little bit counts. Also, the vendors are amazing too, so you should definitely support them downstairs as well. And we'll just turn on the lights, and then you guys can just go ahead and make sure you have all your stuff with you as you're heading out. And thank you so much. And next at 4 p.m. is the multimedia dance up here, so just know that's at 4 p.m. And downstairs there's some dance stuff right now as well. All right, thank you.